Well, apparently I'm an extremist. I had no idea. I try to use science and I try to be relatively logical. I mean, I get passionate. I get very, very worked up. I mean, that's no joke. But after last week's podcast on the social contract and my premise that we as a society are violating the social contract. Like, and we know that people violate the social contract. We see it every day, right? People don't return their shopping carts. They run red lights in traffic and things like this. They don't get out of the way of ambulances or whatever. But I was called an extremist when it comes to public education. I had some people actually email me, said, Brian, this is a bit extreme. Vouchers do not break the social contract. I go, well, the way that vouchers are set up today, they absolutely break the social contract. But they also had the premise that I was being extreme because they didn't believe that public education was as important as I think it is. And so I was called an extremist. And so today, I guess we'll call this breaking the social contract part 2 or something. I've got some examples of when societies turn their back on education and how that really broke society for everyone involved, no matter what your thoughts are, even if you didn't have kids. Okay, so, and these are all examples, by the way, that it's happened during my lifetime. So these aren't some like 2,000-year-old models, and I know I love to go back into history and get those 2,000-year-old models, but these are recent. Okay, so let's take Cambodia, 1975 to 79 or so, and what happened is they just shut schools down, and they started to destroy books, right? Because that's always the first way it goes. Let's destroy the subjects that we don't want people to learn and read, right? We're just going to get rid of those subjects, right? Teachers and educated professionals were targeted and killed. I put my glasses on for this because there was a funny thing that I read that the intellectuals that had glasses, and this was also true under the China's Cultural Revolution. If you had glasses, you were seen educated and smart, and boom, off to prison you go, or you were killed because you seemed intelligent, and they wanted to stop that down because intelligent people question government, right? Intelligent people know their rights. Intelligent and well-educated people don't just comply with brainwashing, right? And so we don't want any smart people. So education was literally in Cambodia treated as a threat instead of it as an investment. Now I want us to treat it as an investment, right? It was treated as a threat. And so here's how it hurt everyone. The country lost all of its human capital. And what I mean by human capital, I mean the people that did and built things, right? Doctors, nope. Engineers, gone. Administrators, even bureaucrats, government officials are important, right? And they're still recovering from that, right? And a society can't rebuild quickly without skilled people that particular society chose to erase. And I think you'll hear an overall theme in these examples, which are governments that want to control, get rid of people that can question. And you get rid of people that can question, you get rid of your scientists. You get rid of the people that understand the scientific method. You get rid of people that have enough sense to think about a rule and go, does that make sense? Does this hurt society or help society, or does this just help you? Just help you. And they got rid of anyone that was educated. And then they're left. They ain't got no doctors. They don't have any doctors still. Or very few doctors. Now, Cambodia's gotten better, but generation of people died earlier because they didn't have medical care because they got rid of all the damn doctors. Okay, let's go to another one. Kind of be a rapid fire podcast today for you, right? Because I'm a little worked up on being called an extremist. Maybe I'm an extremist. All right, I'll take it. So let's talk about the China's Cultural Revolution. This was in the late 60s and early 70s. I was born in 72 for those of you counting. So I was just a wee lad then. But so same exact kind of structure. Secondary and higher education was massively disrupted. Colleges halted admission for years. Now, what do you learn in college or even in trade schools? How to do things that society needs, right? And so we're not going to have any of those people because we want everybody to go back to just being rice farmers in an agrarian society. And that's what they ended up with, right? And so the research showed that the measurable scars over a lifetime, that everyone earned less money, It decreased mobility, like people couldn't travel and go, share in wealth and share in knowledge. And the entire economy for decades ran slower. And that's why the United States really just ballooned up, because we had educated people, and not just trained educated people, but we allowed people to immigrate here that were well educated. We allowed doctors to come here and scientists to come here and people with trades to come to America, which only increased society's standards in America for everybody, right? And that's what's really cool. I mean, the more educated, the more trained, the more skilled your entire population, the more wealth there is and the higher standard of living for everyone. And we now know that, like in China, their standard of living is just now approaching America, United States, and other Western democracies that really thrived on education, because we believed in educated workforce. This also goes to something that's kind of interesting. We invent a lot of things here. The United States invents a lot of things, and then a lot of those inventions are stolen by other societies. And we give it very freely. Like, we don't have these massive security things. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. But we're going to invent something new next week. We're going to invent something new next year. And so everyone else is playing catch up, or at least they have been. But now, do we have less inventors? Do we have less people creating awesome things that society benefits and increases the standard of living for everyone? A lot of people say there are. Maybe we'll dig into that next time. Okay. I'm going to give you another example. Afghanistan. And this is kind of true of Iran also. I mean, it was Afghanistan in the last 10 to 15 years for certainly. And then it was Iran in the 70s, right? Iran was a very modern society and good standard of living, increase in standard of living in the 60s and the early 70s. I mean, on par with America and France and England and all those countries, right? And then what happened in kind of both those nations, I'll just kind of lump them together, is the first thing they do is they start limiting what people can learn. They start limiting the curriculum, right? And it's always science. And then they start banning who can learn, like who. It's always groups. And it's always the women first. It's always women. So in Afghanistan, they did a nationwide ban that removed girls from secondary schools and universities. So you're basically saying now half of your educated workforce, half of your educated individuals that could do awesome things, now we're not even going to train them. Forget about it. And UNICEF estimates that the ban alone costs Afghanistan 2.5% of their GDP every single year, which is like a cumulative long-term effect, right? So fewer trained health workers, fewer teachers, fewer entrepreneurs. And then the mortality rate went up, weaker household incomes, right? And that's a tax on the entire society, not just the uneducated half, but the educated half are now paying the bills and paying for all those issues. And it starts slowly, guys. I mean, sometimes it goes really fast, like in Cambodia, but sometimes it starts slowly, and they just slowly start taking away education. Okay, and let's do a couple more. Let's do one right here at home. Because people are, well, that can't happen in a modern democracy. It can't happen. But let's talk about the Jim Crow legacy in the United States, which, the experts will say was basically a chronic underfunding of minority schools, African-American schools, right? And so for decades in the States, I think it was 2 decades, right? 2 decades in the States, or actually three or 4 decades in the States, districts are systematically underfunding schools serving black children. Okay, so how does this hurt everyone? Well, undereducating large groups of children, which I believe is what Vouchers will do now, depresses entire regions' productivity, their overall earnings, and their public health, right? They're going to drain public health also, right? Because, well, that's a whole thick topic, but I think we get it, is that areas with persistent inequalities are always going to face lower growth and higher society cost, right? And that is paid by all the taxpayers. Now, I get 100 years ago when we didn't have a federal income tax, maybe it would just depress that particular area. But now we have federal income tax, and the federal government's huge, and we all pay taxes into that, and they augment society's weak spots. I mean, that's kind of the general idea of any kind of large federal institution is it's supposed to balance the equation, and so that every place in the United States at least has an equal footing and equal chance. So even if you have great public schools and great well-educated people in one state, that other state that's depressed is going to cost you, even though you don't live in that state, right? In actual tax dollars, right? Property values, local wages, things like that, right? So I think the theme here is that whenever a society tries to save pennies in schools, it's going to pay dollars in prisons, healthcare costs, and lost productivity later. I mean, education isn't a charity, right? It's a payroll. It's an investment in future nurses and electricians and small business owners. And so once again, I really want us to think about the future, and that education of all children, every single one of them, not even just your children, but all of them, impacts you positively when you invest in their future. So just like any investment, invest now, get great returns down the road. I hope this gives you some more ammunition to deal with the people that are more narrow-minded than you are. All right. Thanks. Bye.